And we have Miriam Sagan speaking with us today on Metaphor as Compassion, how the language of poetry brings us closer together. Oh, I can't wait. She's the author of over 30 books of poetry, fiction, and memoir. Holy cow, 30 books. That's incredible. And she has some at the back. And all the proceeds go to a food pantry, to feeding people. That is a lovely thing to do. She's been a writer in residence in 4 national parks and 2-time winner of the New Mexico Arizona Book Award. Kind of long, so I'm trying to get all the good stuff in. She works with text and sculptural installations as part of a mother-daughter creative team. Her daughter, Isabel Winson-Sagan, they have something called Maternal Mitochondria. She founded and directed the creative writing program at the Santa Fe Community College until her retirement. Her poetry was set to music for the Santa Fe Women's Chorus, incised on stoneware for 2 haiku pathways, and projected as video inside an abandoned building during the pandemic under the auspices of Vital Spaces. You're doing a lot of cool stuff. Please welcome Miriam Sagan.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. It's such a treat. A different place, but a perfect place for poetry. And today I'm going to share some of my work. I'm going to share some of the things that come out of poetry that might be useful to us all, or at least refreshing. So I thought a lot about metaphor. You know, in school, they try to tell you metaphor and simile are different things. Like a metaphor is a comparison that doesn't have like or as, and a simile has like or as, and that's true, but it's not very exciting. I mean, they're kind of the same thing, right? But what is it? So all day long, you're walking around in the world, and things are like each other, and they're not like each other. And you meet people, you meet animals, you meet nature, you meet ideas, you meet Taos Mountain, and it's like you, and it's not like you. And this can be very challenging, even if there's a like or an as. I mean, it's very challenging to be in relationship to things. The person who said the prayer was for God, it's a very relational thing to say. We're in relationship to so many things, but not always aware of it. So when you feel like you're close to something, if you're me, I like it, right? Oh, it's like me. Taos Mountain, how is it like me? It's in Taos, okay. That gives me a little connection, but it's also very much not like me, right? In that it's huge. And if it's thinking, it's not thinking the way I am. So I have to stretch. I have to use my imagination, an almost spiritual capacity of imagination, to see how things are connected. And I think when you awaken that sense of connection, it's a lot easier to get through the day. So that's my starting point. And I'll talk a little as I go about how some of these poems were made, why, and how. This first one is about the labyrinth outside of St. Francis Cathedral in Santa Fe, and about walking it. Walking the labyrinth barefoot, only one way in and one way out, passing my friends, each going at her own pace. In the city that is mine, outside the cathedral that is not mine, looking up, I see tourists snapping the photos of us. We must look like serious penitents, heading for Jerusalem in the center. Things seem to speed up closer to the end. 2 plump young girls have appeared on the cathedral steps in elaborate purple gauze gowns on a Monday morning. And the Rose of Sharon tree sheds its white and blood-red blossoms, petals falling on an empty pair of discarded sandals. So you know when you're walking in a labyrinth, time and motion kind of are different. I did not realize until I wrote this poem a while ago, I've read it, but that actually you find the person's shoes at the end, but they're not the person's shoes, right? I'm barefoot, and there's some shoes hanging out, and they're not my shoes. So that's kind of a nice metaphorical connection as we go. The poems in this book were written under very stressful, for me, circumstances of being very ill and having a very scary diagnosis. And it's not the kind of circumstances that I would encourage a person to start writing. Although if you could, that would be incredible. But I could only do, to be honest, what I already knew how to do. Okay, I couldn't like take up some activity that was new to me. But poetry is very helpful. Language itself is very helpful. It takes us sometimes to a place where we can settle down. And so here's a little poem about that. I felt the presence of God, or rather we met, in the air above my bed, beneath the familiar ceiling of the room. It turns out things are simpler than I'd first imagined. So you yourself can ask yourself, what have I imagined about trouble? You know what I mean? What have I imagined about suffering? Is it complex? Is it simple? And then what's my experience? Is my experience the same or is it different? There's your metaphor again, because you're trying to figure out, you know how they say when in police work, the first rule is know your location? And I sometimes think that's also true for poets. Know your location. Where are you? Where are we? Physically, actually, emotionally, personally, and then take it from there. So there's a kind of centering that you need when you're reading and writing poetry. So I was just sort of going around being scared, being freaked out in my normal life. I would almost say, is there anybody here who has not had that experience? How fortunate you are. Sort of seeing things through a double vision and also trying to, pay attention to what was around me, what I cared about. And I have a friend, and the friend has a statue of a Buddhist figure, a Jizo statue, outside her door, a very beautiful, beautiful statue, but you could buy it, at Jackalope or something. It's a garden statue. And a lot of my personal background is in Buddhism and also the traditions of Judaism, but I lived in Zen monasteries off and on in my youth. So I was very fascinated by her statue, and this is what I discovered writing about it. The Jizo statue by your door, varnished pale green, stands serene but lacking a thumb on the right hand. So I assumed your little dog, so much fun but given to chasing delivery vans, must have knocked it down, or someone's toddler, or a spring wind. Jizo is the protector of travelers, monks, and children, or water babies, miscarriage, abortion, of things unseen that might get born or not. The bodhisattva of bus stops, mailboxes, and pilgrims. And I was wrong. You say you purchased the Jizo just the way it stands today, like all of us, an imperfect container. So I never would have known. I never asked my friend, how come the bodhisattva is missing a thumb? But then when I started to write about it, I started to inquire about it, and I found out something about her. And of course, a very beautiful, special Buddhist bodhisattva of people who are on a journey or in transition from one place to another place, right? And in Japan, roadside statue for being, and that's why there's a bus stop in here, for being the protector of tourists, pilgrims, travelers, and those on an errand, let's say. To go on somewhat in this vein, I want to read this poem and I don't want to read this poem. It's got Truchas Peaks in it, right? What I think we came up, through the gorge, very beautiful today, probably go back on the high road, to Santa Fe. If I see Church's Peaks, I want to read it to you. But it says some ambiguous things in it about friendship. So I want to clarify. It says I don't want to see my friends. Now, can that be true? But perhaps if you look within, there are times when you do not want to see other people. No matter how much you love them and how much they love you, that sort of, you do not need human company at that moment, right? And so perhaps what you need instead is something, well, I'll tell you, I'll read it. I don't want to see any of my friends. I want to see Church's Peak. Who knows what keeps us company? The bird in the mountain. My friends have opinions. Church's Peak does not. I'll keep myself company, the bird flown from the mountain. My friends say they love me. Church's Peak does not. This keeps me company. No bird, no mountain. Thank you for listening, because I feel odd about that poem, even though I wrote it. Do you know what I mean? I can't just read it without like a little explanation, particularly if there's people that I know, sitting there. So thank you for listening to it. This is about, a medical test, about the stress of being sick and in that kind of a situation. It also references something called Tangario, which is a Buddhist ritual where if you want entry to a temple, you sit outside until they let you in. And I did do that once. I sat inside, actually, at San Francisco Zen Center, and it was very scary because there were no bells, and now turn to page, you know what I mean? You came in 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, and you just stayed for 48 hours. So when are you gonna get up, right? When are you gonna stay? And I was quite young at the time. I very much overdid. I should have stood up a lot more and washed my face than I did, but there was something about it that was, I don't know, it was like being shot out of a cannon. It was a very limited and intense experience. So there's metaphor straight up in this. In the scan tube, I'm reminded of Tangario, where a monk sits alone and silent, cross-legged, motionless at the monastery entrance, asking for admission hour after hour as snow falls or red maple leaves brush the monk's shaved head. I tried this once, not deep in the mountains, but in the basement of the Zen Center at Page and Laguna. For 2 days, I faced my shadow on the rice paper screen. No bells were struck, nor was the Han with the sound of wood on wood. Nothing told me it was time to move, and so I didn't move, but sat still in pain. Now on my back in the whirring machine, keep my arms thrown over my head in an abandoned gesture, almost sensuous or free, while in my mind I sit at the temple gate as white spots light up, an image that might be me. Good to have a comparison, right? Good to have a comparison, particularly when you're doing something you've never done before. And, the poem will never really tell me were those the same thing or were they different things, but they both existed within me. So that was my understanding of how they were sort of compatible and together. There are, in this book, which is about illness, there are some, what you might call socio-political poems. There are poems about the atomic history of New Mexico, and there's poems about the creation of the atom bomb. Because again, if the poet's job is to know your location, it's like, you are here, and here we are. So many things are happening at the same time, all around us. We can't even keep up with them. Like, what's happening, right? I mean, there's a parked car over there. People could be having a fight. People could be falling in love. People could be, I don't think there's really anybody in the car. But we're in that field, right? We're in the same field, but we also, it's a mystery to us. We're also not in the same field. We don't always know what's happening. So I did put, as I say, some history in, some other, ideas. And I spent some time in residence with a place called Center for Land Use Interpretation, which is out in Great Basin in Wendover. And I was in a little, quote, living pod, which was like a tiny trailer. And I was totally alone on the edge of 6 million acres of bombing range. This is a very heavy place to be. And that's where the Enola Gay was built, in the Wendover airport, and that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. So there's a kind of an emotional line, between Trinity in New Mexico, Wendover, and Hiroshima. And it was an abandoned Air Force base. And I am in it, in my little living pod, writing poems. The first day I got there, I didn't mean to talk about this, but I feel like I ought to tell you, I was like, I can't go on. I cannot stay in this living pod on this bombing range with this state of mind, which was, fear and aversion. And so it was like, it would be very embarrassing to give up the grant and go home. So what will happen? So I had to change my state of mind. And mercifully, I was able to, and I stayed, and I actually came back for a second go-round. So it was only about a week, 10 days each time. That's a long night, right, out there by yourself. So this is partially about that experience. Coyotes howl. I smell the wood smoke of the only neighbor squatting in abandoned barracks in Wendover, and hear the bark a dog makes on a chain. The discoverer of fission hides a Jewish pianist in his Berlin apartment. Napalm means sticky fire. Wife of the inventor of poison gas to control a city without occupation kills herself. This is the mind, and this is my problem, and this is Venus rising and setting, and a guard tower, and the moon, and a darkness that is both bombing range and empty space. And don't ask me, I don't know the answer. And each of us with our many ancestors. I think I'll read one more from this collection and then move on. The editor of the book said, "What is that about the ancestors?" At the end of that poem. She wanted to take out the line. Well, if you've had an editor, you know that you have to do what your editor says unless you really whine a lot. And I was like, take it out, okay. And then she put it back in before the book went to press. So I leave it to you, since it says I don't know the answer, I leave it to you to understand what our many ancestors are doing, at any moment of the day. This is a sort of, I think it's self-explanatory. It's a soft-hearted poem. Sometimes it takes a soft night snowfall to remind me things that go away never come back. All my friends know this is true, yet no one will talk about it. Reading a poem aloud in Spanish, a language in which I know only 2 words, Nevada and Lamentar, I keep myself company on the unmade bed. You've gone out, I stay at home. Everyone knows it will soon be the exact opposite, but no one listens when I try to talk about it. And I'm sure also that you've all had that experience too, of trying to talk about something and either not talking about it correctly, or maybe people are listening, but you don't know, but that sensation of silence around you. That's what the poem is good for, though, right? The poem is kind of taking care of you, of us, as we go. So the book I just read from is called Thanks for Stopping By. What does that mean? I'll let you figure that out. I mean, it was thanks for stopping by, like to illness and death and all kinds of problems. But it's also something that I always say. My mother must have said it when somebody would come by. She'd say, thanks for stopping by, right? So it's about greeting things as they come and go. And I'm going to read a few poems from a brand new book. Basically, if you want a book, just, it's by donation. Just put whatever you feel like putting into the little blue vase, and I will get it to the Food Depot. This is something I figured out a long time ago that I could do, and it's nice. It's a nice feeling, and that way you don't have to worry. You know how you get into that thing? It's like, is a book of poetry worth $11 or $12? And the answer is, it might be worth $1 million or nothing. We don't really know. So anyway, that's my invite to you. While there's a kind of stressful story behind, thanks for stopping by, there's a cheerier but equally stressful in a different way, more fun, stressful story behind this book, which is called What Solitude Sees in Me. And it's uncollected poems going back to 1975. And what is a uncollected poem? Well, for me, it was a mystery folder that said something on it like taxes. And when I opened it up, it was full of poems that I didn't remember writing. So this is, what you might call the problem of having an office with a file cabinet in it in which you stuck things without really committing to them. And my work is archived in Texas, and I'm supposed to send them what I've got. But I didn't know what I had, and I kept putting things into a kind of a drawer that was called, maybe something will happen and I'll never have to deal with this drawer. So what was in there, I started to feel plagued by it. And at first I thought these are poems that were never in books, so I'm just going to send them to the archive, who cares, right? And then, of course, my curiosity came up, and I started to sort them. 3 piles. No, I never wanted to see them again. Maybe they could see the light of day, and yes. And everything that was in maybe went into no, interestingly. It was some sort of sentimental feeling, put things into maybe. But when I had yes, I had about 75 poems, and so I thought, it's a little bold to go back to 1975, after all, when I'm, 21, 22, something like that, and see if those poems go together in a book. So it turned out they did, and I was very aided by Zach Hively, who's an incredible editor of Casa Press in Abiquiu. And, it's just nice. It's just nice to think that there's a great press in Abiquiu. I don't know why. When I drive by, I just feel good about it. So put the book together, and it is indeed, a look at the past. Blue numbers tattooed on the old woman's arm, a head in line of my brother at the all-night delicatessen in Brooklyn. It was snowing. He was carrying a paper cup of coffee, 2 pastries in a white bag. He wanted to say something to her, but he didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
This is a poem that has Taos in it, it has sex in it, and it's only 4 lines. So how bad can it be? At the next table, girl in the yellow dress at the Cafe Taza says that tantric sex has knocked her silly. Her boyfriend looks so ordinary, drinking foam off cafe latte. I spent a lot of time in my life, in Cafe Taza for unknown reasons. I guess at one time it was sort of synonymous for me with being in Taos. This is a poem that doesn't quite have the narrative that the others do. It's more of an impression, and it's about mystery. It's called Bread Mystery. In the uncountable alphabet, bitter pine forest of words, sans serif without butter or jam. One day we'll eat earth and cry for more, drink tea through a sugar cube in italics. How is the strand of wheat bent heavy with seed, supposed to speak without being ground. The night was aphasia, and the day also said nothing, had nothing to say. It's winter, and the wild girl goddess has gone underground. Why me is not a question that bears repeating. I think I'm going to read maybe 2 or 3 more, and see what kind of comes to hand in terms of, oh, okay. I don't know, I'm guessing you've had an experience of having written something or made something or composed something, and then you didn't really realize that you did it, and years later you're like, did I do that? It sounds like a letter I could have written, but was it really me? These are something called Sijo, S-I-J-O. They're Korean short poems. They're 3 very long lines, just traditional Korean style. They've been Americanized, and I like to write them. So there's 3 of them here. When will I see you again? In a dream, in the face of a child, crossing the red bridge, talk of spirits brings tears to our eyes. Autumn forgives summer for leaving the far blue foothills. The small pine, late pink roses with uncurled petals, far view of mountains, cloudless sky, and effortless blue. The best way to be my friend is to want to talk about death. You want to see the solar eclipse with me, your oldest friend. We'll go to San Isidro, the slot canyons, darkness and light. We've grown so old, this might be the last time we meet to say goodbye.
That's beautiful.
There's something about the Asian art poetic forms like haiku, haiga, senryu that have just a very great connection to New Mexico in terms of an awareness of nature. I mean, you could write them in the city, but you don't have to, when you're here, you can just enter into that sort of ancient traditional relationship. And this is about just being a little north of here in Colorado. All it takes is rain to turn these southern Colorado mountains into a Sung Dynasty painting. You watch a bear amble away down an alley and have to restrain yourself from following. Later, looking for Mercury, you count the stars to make sure the Shabbat you don't keep is over. I'm going to close with the last 2 poems in this book, one of which is very short. I'll read it and then I'll tell you something funny about it, and then I'll read you the last one. Midnight, pee in a can. Outside in the dark, all the Sangre de Cristos white-capped. A reviewer said this is a poem about camping, except it was actually a poem about being in a Zen monastery that did not have very good plumbing. And so for me, it's so funny. I was like, how could they think that? But of course, how would they ever know, right? The poem has a life of its own. It goes on, it moves on, without us. And in a way, the metaphors that we see and experience also have a life of their own, right? They move through space and time, and hopefully they connect that feeling of us to the feelings of other things. Where I grew up in New Jersey, there were quarries. The quarries, stone quarries were abandoned, they filled with water. And high school students used to jump into those, and kids used to jump into those quarries. And I must have done it once when I was a child, and it scared me so much. But it stayed with me. Like I wanted to jump into the quarry. I just couldn't do it. So then many years later, I jumped into the quarry in a poem. Okay, we'll just call that the solution. And this is called Just Jump. And I think it also really, it really talks about the same thing that we have here in this room. I mean, it has an angel in it, and it has spontaneity, and it has the human body, and those things are all jumping into the quarry. Just jump. To leap from the lip of the granite quarry is to show off, become a corpse, touch the angel of burning air on the way down. Pick one. To break the surface of the water is to acquire a body, to brush domes and towers with bare feet, to change your name to return to center. All of the above. Thank you for having me. Come talk to me later if you want.